Grace, mercy, and peace are yours from God our Father and from our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Jacob had 12 sons. He had his 12 sons by 4 wives. Rachel was his favorite wife. Rachel bore him 2 of his sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Since Joseph was the eldest son of his favorite wife, Jacob favored Joseph over Jacob's other sons. Jacob gave Joseph gifts that Jacob did not give to his other sons. The most famous gift was the so-called coat of many colors. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father favored Joseph over them, Joseph's brothers were jealous of him. Joseph brought a bad report of his brothers to their father, and that is when Joseph's brothers began to hate him. It did not help that Joseph had a dream. In the dream, he and his brothers were binding sheaves in the field. All at once, Joseph's sheaf stood up straight, and Joseph's brother's sheaves bowed down to his sheaf. When Joseph got up in the morning, he told this dream to his brothers. His brothers hated him all the more. Is Joseph really to reign over us? Joseph had another dream. In this dream, Joseph dreamt that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to him. When he told his brothers this dream, even his father rebuked him. Really? Is your mother and I and your brothers really to bow down to you? But Jacob kept the matter in mind. Joseph's brothers were keeping their father's flocks at Hebron. Jacob sent Joseph to check on Joseph's brothers. When Joseph got to Hebron, his brothers were not there. A man found him wandering in the fields. The man said, "Your brothers have gone to Dothan." Joseph went to Dothan to check on his brothers. When his brothers saw him coming, they began to conspire together. "Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him, and we'll see what becomes of his dreams." When they made this proposal, Reuben said, "Let us not kill him. Let's throw him in one of these cisterns." Reuben had recently lost favor with his father, and he wanted to regain it. He thought he might be able to do so if he restored Joseph to his father. They agreed with Reuben's plan. When Joseph came, they grabbed him, threw him in a cistern, and then sat down and had lunch. While they were having lunch, some Ishmaelite traders came by. When the Ishmaelite traders came by, Judah said to his brothers, "Let's not kill him, let's sell him to these Ishmaelite traders." So they pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him to the Ishmaelite traders. Joseph's brothers took his coat of many colors and tore it into pieces. They slaughtered a goat. They dipped the robe in the goat's blood, and they brought it home to their father. They said to Jacob, "Please identify this. Is this your son Joseph's or not?" Jacob said, "It is my son, Joseph's. Surely some wild animal has torn him to pieces. I have lost my son." Jacob grieved for Joseph many days. His other sons tried to comfort him, but he would not be comforted. Meanwhile, the Ishmaelites sold Joseph into slavery in Egypt. Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, bought Joseph. The Lord blessed Potiphar's home because of Joseph. When Potiphar saw that the Lord had blessed his home because of Joseph, he put Joseph in charge of his household. The entire household was blessed by God because of Joseph. Potiphar was so confident in Joseph that he did not concern himself with any of the matters of his home except the food that he ate. One day, Potiphar's wife cast her eye upon Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Joseph refused. She persisted, "Come to bed with me." He said to her, "Everything in this house is under my authority except for you, because you are my master's wife. How could I do such a thing and sin against God?" Joseph avoided her. He refused to even be with her. One day when Joseph went into the house, none of the other servants were there. Potiphar's wife took him by the cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." Joseph fled, and he left his cloak by by her side. When Potiphar's wife saw that Joseph had left his cloak by her side, she said to the other servants, "Our master has purchased a Hebrew to make sport of us. He tried to go to bed with me, but when I screamed, he fled and left his cloak." When Potiphar came home, she told him the same story. Potiphar was so angry that he threw Joseph into prison. He threw Joseph into the prison where the king's prisoners were kept. The Lord blessed the prison because of Joseph. When the keeper of the prison saw that the Lord blessed the prison because of Joseph, he put Joseph in charge of the other prisoners. One day, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker lost favor with Pharaoh. He threw them into the prison where Joseph was. The keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of them. One day, in the morning, Joseph noticed that the faces of the chief cupbearer and the faces of the chief baker were downcast. When he asked them what was wrong, they said, "We have both had dreams, and we do not know how to interpret them." Joseph said, "Doesn't the interpretation of dreams belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The chief cupbearer said to Joseph, "I dreamt that I was standing in front of a vine with 3 branches. I took grapes from the vine, crushed it into a cup, and put the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Joseph said, "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your former position. You will put the cup in Pharaoh's hand as you did previously." When the baker saw that the chief cupbearer had received a favorable interpretation, the baker told Joseph his dream. The baker said, "I dreamt that I had 3 baskets on my head filled with all kinds of baked things for Pharaoh. The birds of the air kept eating of the baked things. I tried to shoo them away, but I could not." Joseph said, "This is the interpretation of the dream. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off of your shoulders. He will hang you." Joseph said to the chief cupbearer, "When Pharaoh restores you to your position, please remember me before Pharaoh. I was unjustly sold in the land of the Hebrews and brought here as a slave." In 3 days, the interpretation of the dreams came to pass. Pharaoh restored the chief cupbearer to his position and had the baker hanged. But the chief cupbearer forgot about Joseph, and he stayed another 2 years in prison until Pharaoh had his dreams. Pharaoh dreamt that 7 cows came out of the Nile, plump and good. He also dreamt that 7 other cows came up out of the Nile after them. The second 7 cows were scrawny and thin. The scrawny and thin cows ate up the 7 plump cows and were just as scrawny as they were before, and Pharaoh woke up. When Pharaoh fell asleep again, he had a second dream. In the second dream, he dreamt that there were 7 heads of grain on one stalk, plump and good. On the same stalk were 7 other heads, blighted by the east wind and thin. The blighted heads of grain ate up the plump ears of grain, and Pharaoh awoke. None of the Egyptian magicians could interpret this dream for Pharaoh. While Pharaoh was inquiring about the interpretation of his dreams, the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "I am reminded today of my sins. A long while ago, you were displeased with the chief baker and myself, and you put us in prison. The chief baker and I both had dreams. There was a young Hebrew in the prison who interpreted our dreams. The interpretation of our dreams came to pass. You restored me to my position, but you hanged the chief baker." And Pharaoh, in Old Testament style, basically said, "Well, where is this guy? Get him in here." So they brought Joseph from the prison. He bathed, he shaved, he changed his clothes, and he came before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh told Joseph, "I understand that you have the ability to interpret dreams." Joseph says, "Does not the interpretation of dreams belong with God? Tell me your dreams, O king." And Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams, and Joseph interpreted them. "O Pharaoh, your dreams are one and the same. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. Your dreams are one and the same. The 7 scrawny cows and the 7 years of grain blighted by the east wind are 7 years of famine, which will follow the 7 years of plenty. The reason you receive the dream in 2 forms is because God has resolved to do this, and it will happen soon. What you need to do, O Pharaoh, is store up 1/5 of the harvest during the plentiful years as a buffer against the years of famine. When Pharaoh heard the interpretation of his dreams and the wise suggestion that Joseph had made, he said, "Who is like this man, in whom there is the spirit of the holy gods?" Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and I will be king over Egypt, but nobody shall lift a finger in Egypt except at your command." Pharaoh gave Joseph his robe. Pharaoh gave Joseph his signet. Pharaoh gave Joseph his chain. Pharaoh gave Joseph a chariot. Pharaoh gave Joseph men to run in front of the chariot. Tell the Egyptians to bow the knee. Joseph was basically second in command over all of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, Joseph stored up 1/5 of the harvest in the local cities as a buffer against the years of famine when they came. Pharaoh gave Joseph a wife, and she bore Joseph 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now when the years of famine came, the famine was also severe in the land of Canaan, where Joseph's brothers and father were still living. Jacob heard that they had food in Egypt, so he sent his sons down to Egypt to buy food. Jacob did not send Benjamin down because he wanted to keep Benjamin with him. He was worried that something might happen to Benjamin. Benjamin was the only remaining son of his favorite wife. So the 10 brothers went down into Egypt, and when they got to Egypt, they found out that Joseph was the one that you buy grain from, and they went before Joseph. They did not recognize him. He was dressed as an Egyptian. They thought he was dead. He was speaking through an interpreter, and they bowed down in front of him, and Joseph remembered his dreams. Joseph recognized his brothers. "What are you doing here?" They said, "We are 12 brothers, the sons of one man. One is at home with his father, and the other is no more. We are here to purchase grain for our households in the land of Canaan." Joseph said, "No, you're not. You're spies. You are here to spy out the land." And they said, No, we're not spies. Your servants have never been spies. We are honest men." And Joseph put them all in prison for 3 days. When he got them out of prison, he said, "Look, I fear God. Take grain back to your starving households in the land of Canaan. I will keep one of you here in prison while the rest of you go home. When you come back, bring your youngest brother with you so that your words may be verified, and I will know that you are not spies." He took Simeon and put Simeon in prison. When the brothers left for home with their grain, one of them opened his sack in order to feed his donkey at a lodging place on the way. When he opened his sack, he found that his money had been returned to him. When the brothers all got home, they found that all of their money had been returned to them, and they were afraid. They ate all the grain. And Jacob said, "Go back down to Egypt and buy a little more grain." And Judah said to his father, "Father, look, the man said we could not go down there unless we brought our youngest brother with us. So give us our youngest brother so we can go down and buy more grain." And Jacob said, "Why did you tell him that you had a younger brother?" And the brother said, "He just asked us, 'Do you have another brother? Is your father still living?' How did we know he would say that we would not see his face again unless we brought our younger brother with us?" Jacob said, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin too." Finally, the hunger got so bad that Judah said to his father, "Look, father, if we had not delayed, we could have gone down and back to Egypt twice. Put the boy in my custody. I will guarantee his safety. If anything happens to Benjamin, I will bear the blame before you forever." And Jacob finally agreed and gave them Benjamin, and they all went back down to Egypt before Joseph and bowed before him again. Joseph recognized his younger brother. He asked his brothers, "Is this your younger brother?" They said, "Yes." "Is the old man, your father, about whom you spoke, still alive?" And they said, "Yes." Joseph was overwhelmed brother, and he left their presence in order to weep. When he had composed himself and washed his face, he came back out and invited them to his home for dinner. The brothers were convinced that Joseph was going to order the Egyptians to fall upon them and take their donkeys. They went up to the steward of Joseph's house and said, "Hey, look, when we came here the last time, we brought money to buy grain. When we went home, we found the money back in our sacks. We've returned that money, and we brought extra money to buy grain for our households." The chief steward said, "Peace to you. God has put money in your sacks. I received your money." And then the steward brought Simeon out to them. When they sat down to eat dinner with Joseph, Benjamin received 5 times the portions of any of the other brothers, and Joseph made sure all the brothers were seated in their birth order at the table. The brothers were amazed. When he sent his brothers home, he told his chief steward, "Put the money back in their sacks again, and put my cup in the sack of the youngest. When they have left the city, go and chase them down, and accuse them and tell them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? You have stolen my master's cup.'" When the brothers had left town, the chief steward overtook them and said, "Why have you repaid evil for good? You have stolen my master's cup. Whoever sack has the cup, that person will be my slave." The brother said, "Whoever has your cup, that person will die." And the steward said, "I agree. Whoever has the cup will be my slave." They searched through all the cup. They found the cup in Benjamin's sack. They all tore their clothes and returned to Joseph in the land of Egypt. When they got back, Judah went before Joseph and said, "I have guaranteed Benjamin's safety to my father. My father's life is bound up with Benjamin's life. If we don't go back home with Benjamin, I fear the evil that will come to my father. Surely our father will die of grief. I have become a pledge of security for my brother. Let me be your slave in his place." And at that point, Joseph could contain himself no longer. He began to weep, and he announced to his brothers, "I am your brother Joseph." And they were dismayed at his presence. That is exactly how the disciples felt when Jesus appeared in that room and said, "Peace be with you." The brothers were dismayed at his presence. They tried to kill him. They sold him into slavery. He spent time unjustly persecuted in a pagan country. The only reason he came to power was because God brought him to power. Once God brought him to power, he had power over all the land of Egypt. He could do what he wanted to his brothers. If he ordered his Egyptian slaves to kill his brothers, he would not only be just in doing so, his father would never find out. Who would tell him that he had done anything wrong? The brothers knew that. They were dismayed at his presence. Jesus is risen from the dead. He has authority over the living and the dead. God has appointed him to judge the living and the dead. The disciples betrayed him, denied him, and deserted him. He shows up in a locked room, demonstrating his resurrection power. He can do what he likes with those disciples, and no one can tell him that he is doing wrong. And what does Jesus choose to do with all of his resurrection power with his dismayed disciples? He chooses to say, "Peace be with you." And he shows them his hands and his side. He shows them the marks of their peace. He shows them the marks that have purchased their peace. There will be no condemnation today. No casting into the eternal fire for these disciples. There will be only peace. Peace be with you. And that is what Joseph told his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" back to get their father. When they got off of the wagons at their father's tent, they said to their father, Joseph is still alive, and he's ruler over all the land of Egypt. Jacob must have thought those brothers have lost their minds. But that has to be exactly the way the disciples felt. When Mary Magdalene shows up and says, I have seen the Lord, he is risen. The disciples thought it was an idle tale, until Peter and John went out and found the tomb empty. Jacob thought his sons had lost their minds, until he looked at those Egyptian wagons and said, my son Joseph must still be alive. I will go down and see him before I die. The New Testament quotes the Old Testament numerous times in order to teach us that the events of the New Testament fulfill the prophecies, events, and institutions of the Old Testament. In spite of the many quotations that the New Testament has of the Old Testament, the New Testament still does not list every last thing in the Old Testament that points to Christ. So far as I know, there is no New Testament quotation that points to the account of Joseph as a preview of what it will be like for our Lord's disciples when Jesus rises from the dead. The New Testament gives you enough to go on so that you understand how you should read the Old Testament and look for the Christ. It points to enough places so that you can find examples of those things which point to the Christ, but it does not tell you every last one. It allows you to read the New Testament and the Old Testament on your own, and to explore the Old Testament looking for your Lord